So you guys want to hear about the first time I ever took mushrooms and became a super chicken? So first, we got to go back into my childhood, when I was just a little chickadee. I was super gullible. I was compulsively honest, and unless presented with an absolute obvious lie, I was inclined to believe whatever people said. Really, I remember one time well into being an adult, I was talking with someone and I realized at that moment that every time my mom had said, I was going to take you kids out for ice cream today, but you're being so bad, no ice cream for you. I remember realizing that ice cream had never been a possibility. Ice cream had been the fentanyl at the border all along. So when I saw those this is your brain on drugs commercials, I assumed that the TV was telling the truth. And to be fair, studies are now showing that heavy pot usage in teens is probably not great for a developing brain. But it does also show that it can stop your body from eventually putting on a lot of weight. So, fuck you, TV. Anyway, um, I remember when Steve Jobs died, I had bought his authorized autobiography by Walter Isaacson, and I found learning about Steve Jobs really fascinating. If you've only ever learned about him through the news or TV, you've never gotten the complete picture. Not saying that the book really gives you that, but he was a really interesting person to learn about. I think one of the reasons that I always really connected with him, or like was a hero of mine when I was young, was because he was always the smartest person in the room. And if you look at the people that he surrounded himself with, I would say he was trying to not have to be the smartest person in the room. Like when you're around really smart people, they get lonely always being the smartest person in the room. So they will often try and attract other people who are even smarter than them. And those are the most fun people to be around, in my opinion. I remember once when I was young, I actually snuck out of my own birthday party once to watch him announce a new product on a live stream. Of course, the one thing that I was like, he might have been brilliant, but he must have been wrong about this, was reading about how he'd experimented with psychedelic drugs in his college years. I don't know if they ever really say that he stopped. They mostly focus on it as a college thing, but I mean, there was the flower power I'm at. Anyway, I was raised a very evangelical Christian, and for me, for so much of my life, drugs were a sin, especially since I didn't want to do them. So fast forward almost a decade, and despite having never recreationally taken anything, though I did once have a Robaxa set that I then had a nap afterwards, and I woke up and all of reality was a grid going on into forever. Was not a fan of that. Uh, other than that experience, I'd never done any recreational drugs or anything like that. But I did find that my mind still had been altered, not by a substance, but by an extended period of being hammered with some of the worst stress that I'd ever had in my life. You see, I decided to try working in ministry again, and the senior minister at the practicum I was at turned out to be a serial back rubber. That's what we'll call it. Fortunately for me, he did not have a big taste for chicken, but he was very interested in sampling two of my friends who I'd met while at the church, both of whom were immigrants and who did not speak English well enough to file a complaint. So I needed to be the one to do that. And it was really tough, especially since up to that point, I'd actually considered that guy not necessarily like a close friend, but like we'd gone out for lunch and things like that. And I remember between when I knew that I had to file the report and when I actually could, at one point his wife came up to me and was like, "Did you eat the cookies that I made for you?" And I had not. And I am not a good liar, but I said yes because I wanted to cry. And Yeah. So at one point during the investigation, the investigator asked me, like this was the only time that I ever even met with the guy. But he asked me, so how are you handling things? How are you doing? And I'd already told a few people this, but they didn't really know what it meant. So with a big smile on my face, I said, "Well, I recently scored a 96 on the Burns Depression inventory," which is not good. He looked back at me wide-eyed and said, "I'm familiar with that tool. I don't want you to take this the wrong way, but how are you still alive?" And I was not prepared for that answer, so I ran off to a bathroom and sobbed in a stall for like half an hour. It was very stressful. And what a lot of people don't understand about PTSD is it's a brain injury. In the same way that if you hurt a bone, it will probably ache for the rest of your life whenever it rains. PTSD, you can actually see it on a brain scan. It's scar tissue. And it's scar tissue in the thing that makes you think, And I think, therefore I am. So it's it's like a physical change that happens in the core of who you are. And I'd gone through many overwhelming events in that process, and I'd had to deal with many ethically compromised people who, for some reason, took jobs and positions that required them to be the people who needed to decide what would happen to protect people, and they were very big on looking out for themselves. Of course, me being a stubborn son of a hen, I didn't drop out of the training program that I was in for another 2 years. um, which, ooh, things you could go back in time and tell yourself. I kept thinking that if I didn't give up, God would eventually see me through. Eventually, one day I realized that maybe it hadn't been God that kept hanging me out to dry over and over again until I was left with nothing. Maybe God wasn't actually asking anything of me because maybe God wasn't there. Um, and that was tough. There's nothing quite like realizing that the non-corporeal super being that you've thought for most of your life was your best friend just probably doesn't exist. Ooh. Um, so yeah, about 7 years after all of that happened, I was working a job doing tech support, and I found out one of my customers was a therapist. And I joked with her, and I was like, "How about I fix your email and you fix my brain?" And she laughed, and because we were having a good time, and I did fix her email. And she asked, what was wrong with my brain. And of course, I was at work, and I wasn't going to give her like everything. You guys got more than she did. But I did tell her that I probably had complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And she said, okay, you need to look up brain spotting. So I was like, okay, I will look up brain spotting. What I should have done was find the book Brain Spotting by David Grand, the guy who discovered it. Instead, I went on YouTube and listened to two hippie ladies talk about it, or talk about something. They used the word brain spotting, but they did not discuss what actually happened. So I just thought that it was hippie nonsense. Until months later, I was very, very frustrated and depressed over things. So I decided to look into it again. And I found someone who actually was a practitioner of it, who'd gone through the like little training program for it. And so I decided to try it out, especially since my benefits through that job would pay for it. And yeah, so I showed up to this guy's office and we talked for a bit. I probably told him maybe a little bit more than what I told you guys, like not that much. For anyone who's worried about giving it a try, it's not like conventional talk therapy where you just keep reliving the events, whatever. Like I kind of expected I was going to have to tell him so much, and I didn't, which was really interesting. So what happened was while I was talking and going on about some of the horrible stuff that broke my brain, he was watching my eyes, and he noticed that when I talked about certain things, my eyes would lock onto this part of the room, or this part of the room, or this part of the room, because there's like an unconscious connection between your eyes and your brain, and there's like some instinctive stuff that happens there. So eventually, he pulls out this pointer, and we're gonna find a spot in 3D space to stare at. And he asked me to, focus or to like take a deep breath and try and relax. And he's like, "Are you relaxed?" And I was like, "Nope." So he was like, "Okay, is there any part of you that's relaxed?" And I'm like, "I guess you could say my butt." He's like, "Okay, I want you to think about your butt." Okay, this is great therapy. So I do. And he kind of like moves the pointer, and it's kind of funny because like, oh, we're gonna find a spot. Okay, then we're gonna find a spot. But then we did find a spot. There was just this one point where I'm staring at this dot, and we move it up and down, left and right, and there it is. And then I stared at it, and I was in a room lit by fluorescent lights. There was no flicker or anything like that. Like the lights were consistent, but I start to notice that like right at this one little spot in space, there's some special effects going on. There's like a light to dark to light to dark to light to dark kind of halo around this one. And again, I had not tried mushrooms at this point. I'm just seeing this little hallucination at this one spot. And I kept staring at it. And I didn't really think about it, but eventually it wasn't just my butt that felt relaxed. I started to, if you have you ever had one of those massages that's really good, and afterwards you're kind of like, whoa, I feel good. It was like that, but I was staring at a dot. So I do that, and I'm a chatty chicken. So of course, after it's been probably like a good 10 minutes, I am compelled to make a joke, and I'm generally pretty good at the jokes. So, with all the confidence of a massage tipsy person, I say, feels funny. Words, work. And he's like, yep, that's okay. It's just the language center of your brain kind of shutting down. That's normal. That's what we want. Just go back to staring. I'm like, okay. And I went back to staring at my little bitty non drug induced hallucination. And you know what the funny part is? It worked. Like, I don't want to say like it was a 100% cure all, whatever, but I felt like myself for the first time in like 7 years. It was crazy. One of the funny parts was I also got really mad about some stuff that I hadn't let myself be mad about. And kudos to me, I did not light certain buildings on fire because I was still very much deep down a good church boy, and I was convinced that I would get caught. But man, did I want to! Like I can empathize with those people lighting up those dealerships right now. Uh, I would never, because I'm terrified of getting caught. But I understand their feelings. Uh, but yeah, so I don't want to say that my brain was 100% better, but it was a lot better. I was a lot more me. And I mean, you could definitely argue that somebody making a chicken puppet and making comedic rants about narcissistic political figures on the internet might not be a great sign of mental health, but you should have seen me before. So, now keep in mind though, I have not tried the whole point of this video yet, right? So in this whole time frame, I'd also decided I was willing to finally try ADHD medication because I'd had like a high school guidance counselor say like, the chicken, you probably have ADHD. And I was like, what did you say? I saw a shiny squirrel. So but I'd always I people had always said like, oh, you don't want to try that kind of medication. It'll make you dead inside and whatever. No, for me, it helps me hold on to the happy feelings, and it helps the things that people say that are not nice and hurt. Not hurt for so long. Like that's what it does for me. I don't even know if you could say that it helps me focus. But yeah, so I around that time I'd also kind of been realizing that maybe some mind altering chemicals might be good. So then I watched the TV show Nine Perfect Strangers, and near the end of that first season, I don't know if they're going to do another season, but somebody mentions that mushrooms have been shown to be a real help with PTSD, and I was like, what? So I started looking into it on the internet, and I was thinking maybe, but what about addiction? And turns out addiction is not a real concern for mushrooms. It's very non-addictive, and like overdosing, like you would just feel really bloated before you could possibly overdose. So like zero risk there as far as I understand. But I'm not a medical professional. This is just talking about my experience. But yeah, so that put my mind at ease a fair bit. Uh so of course, how would I get these? I don't know how to get drugs. But I did date a guy once who really liked to wear heavy metal t-shirts. So I called him up and I was like, hey, can you get me mushrooms? And he was like, yeah, I can get you mushrooms. And I was talking to him like I was the naughty guy in a CBS crime procedural. And he was like, you can buy them on the internet, eh? So, yeah, he came over to my place and he later said that he gave me a gram, but I feel like I remember him saying that he gave me a gram and a half. I don't know exactly how much I took, but I didn't blend them with anything or anything. So they took a long time to hit. And so we hung out for a bit and he kept asking me, like, are you feeling it? Are you feeling it? Are you feeling it? And I'm like, I don't know if I'm feeling it. I did notice that when I closed my eyes, I started to like see like stars rushing at me, like in Star Trek The Next Generation when they go to warp. And I was like, okay, maybe that's all that it is. Maybe I need to take more to get more, but like, this is cool, whatever. And so eventually he was like, I gotta do other stuff. Bye. So before he'd gotten there, I'd been watching the movie Nimona. It's like an animated one. It's a good movie. So I was about halfway through, maybe more than that. And I was like, okay, well, he's gone. I'm going to go back to watching my movie. And so I put my little heated massage pad at my back, my lower back, because, you know, these old chicken bones. Anyway, so I'm watching the movie and I got my little back massager going. And around the time the climax hits, I start thinking, this movie is amazing. This dragon's amazing. Best movie ever. At that moment, the mushrooms had kicked in. I started to realize that all the world's problems could be fixed if we just took all the selfish billionaires, we stuck them in a room with a recliner and a massager, and we had them eat mushrooms, and then they wouldn't need numbers on a spreadsheet to go up because they would have this. This must be the feeling that they've been chasing all their lives. You have fun thoughts when you're on mushrooms. But seriously, it was the most content I have ever felt. And it's funny because people call them hallucinogenics, but like if I take a fair bit and I close my eyes, I'll see like some kind of like moving pictures that kind of blend into other things. And I once one time I took like 2.23 grams, and that is the most that I've ever taken. I don't know that I'll ever do that much again because I got vertigo. And so then I phoned up my buddy and I was like, I would like to complain to the manager of High, and I have decided that that is you. And he laughed, and so then we talked for a while, and then the vertigo went away. And then I kind of started complaining about the images that I was seeing behind my eyes. This one time I was like, this one looks like a painting that would have been in a KFC in the 90s. It's there's not a lot to it. In fact, it's very derivative. It's very derivative. Like the artist should feel ashamed of themselves. And then I realized I am the artist. And so then I was ashamed of the painting behind my eyes. But yeah. The funny part was my plan had been tell no one. I'm going to do this thing. We're going to see if it helps. And then I'm going to be deeply ashamed that I did drugs. What actually happened was it felt amazing. So I opened up the group text that I have with all my friends from Bible college. And I was like, guys, mushrooms are great. And they found it really funny. And yeah, the funny part is, I feel like they really help my brain. I feel, again, chicken face, not necessarily what everybody thinks would be a great mental health advice giver. But I feel like having taken them for a while, a lot of the things that happened in my life that really hurt, they don't stick with me the same way. Like they're memories now. Like they finally got to get filed away where memories are supposed to go, and it's nice. So yeah, that's that's what it was like the first time I took mushrooms. And if you made it this far, feel free to like give a gold star and a mushroom emoji or something, kind of as proof. But thanks so much for watching. Bye.